What's going on, good people? This video, I will be talking about how you can set up automatic backups with your Falcon Pi Player. There was a question posted in the Falcon Pi Falcon Pi Player group on Facebook about the Raspberry Pi and having some issues with the Raspberry Pi. And I made a comment about how I have my Falcon Pi Player set up so that it automatically backs up the configuration, the current folder structure, all the files, the sequences, everything up, and puts those on GitHub as a automatic backup solution. So a person requested more details about that. So I'm going to record this video on how I did that. Here we go. All right, so this is a view of the repository that I currently have with my Falcon Pi configuration. If you go into the Raspberry Pi, which we will do in a second, you will see a similar file structure here with everything in it, all your settings, all your playlists, scripts, and so forth. So what you'll need to do, if you do not already have an account on GitHub, you'll need to create an account on GitHub. If you don't want to use GitHub, there are other alternatives such as JIRA or GitLab that you can use, and that can be your offsite or your backup solution. But you need a site that has or that is compatible with Git. Now, before we continue, I will say that the version of Falcon Pi Player that I am using is currently 4.6. When I originally went through this process, the version that I was using at that point was version 4.3. So if you're using previous versions or future versions of Falcon Pi Player, some of these steps may need to be modified accordingly. So keep that in mind. All right, so once you have your repository, once you have created an account on GitHub, and then you also have created a repository on GitHub, it will give you instructions on how to clone the repository. Now, for my particular setup, I've set the repository to private, and you can do that within the settings. The GitHub documentation will show you how to change a repository visibility. And I set it to private because my sequences are unique to my particular setup, and I didn't want to necessarily share them for free with others. So at some point I may consider changing that, but for right now the repository is set to private. So when you get your repository set up, like I mentioned, there'll be this URL that you'll need to come over here. So do code and HTTPS. Now, if you're doing the repository for the first time, it will give you a set of commands that you need to run on the Raspberry Pi that you're using to do this initial setup. But since I already have this set up, I'm gonna kind of just run with what I already have here, and instead of trying to wipe it and redo everything. All right, so once the repository is set up, the next thing you'll need to do is to SSH into your Falcon Pi Player. And so for mine, if you're using a terminal or using you'll have to use the terminal to do this setup. Otherwise, you have to write out a script, and writing out a script to do this would be a little bit more complex. So your SSH in, and the username to the Falcon Pi Player is FPP, the default username that is. And then here you either put the host name or the IP address in for that. If you're using PuTTY for this, you would just type in the host name in the box, and then once the console window comes up, then you would type the username and the password. And the default password for the Falcon Pi Player is Falcon. All right, and now that you're into the Falcon Pi Player, you will do a ls on the directory. And so I have some additional files here for my particular setup, but the Falcon Pi Player by default comes with this media directory. So you'll want to cd into media. And if you do ls, you'll notice I have excluded some files from my version control because there are some files that you don't need to commit to your version control. However, you can copy everything in this media directory, or have everything in this media directory committed to your version control. Like the cache, you don't need to necessarily copy that. If you don't have anything in a folder, it will not commit that folder. So that's something else to keep in mind. Like the temp folder, you don't need to commit that. And my log folder, I think I excluded that as well. But the images, effects, those in my particular setup, plugins, all of those folders are empty. So that's why you don't see them over here on the GitHub side, because there's nothing in there to commit. So to exclude the files, we'll cover that real quickly. You'll want to create a new file on the file system called .gitignore. And in here, I excluded the cache directory, the cache folder, the logs directory, and the temp directory. This is actually any file that ends with cache, because there are some files, I believe, within some of these folders that end with cache. You don't need to save your cached data. And the log directory, I don't want to have that saved, so I put an exclusion in here to exclude that directory, or those files that end with .log. All right, that being said, the next step is to install Git. If I'm not mistaken, Falcon Pi Player 4.3 already had Git installed. However, if you do not have Git installed, and the one way to test to see if you have Git installed is to type git, and you will get a list of commands like help documentation. If you type git and it says command not found or command not recognized, then you do not have Git installed. So in order to install it, you'll do sudo apt-get install Git. Now, because I already have Git installed on here, it's not going to do anything. As you see, it says Git is already the newest version, so there's nothing for it to do. Then once you do that, you will, to set up your repository, you will come here, you will clone this URL, or you will follow the steps that were provided by GitHub to set up the URL in this particular directory. And then to confirm what is here, you can do git status, and it should show you your status information. And then to also confirm that this repository folder is synchronized with that on GitHub or whichever service that you're using, you can do git remote-v. And as you see here, I have the GitHub. I'm actually using the SSH version here instead of the HTTPS, because the HTTPS actually requires you to log in each time you authenticate. So that being said, I think there was one other step in here in the settings that I may need to do to get this to authenticate. So we have deploy keys. Yeah. So you'll also need to create a SSH key, and this SSH key, I have another video on how to create SSH keys. I will post a link of that down in the description. So you'll create a SSH key, you'll add this in as a deploy key, and you'll need to do this from the Falcon Pi Player itself. And because the way things work is that when the Falcon Pi Player goes to commit, it will authenticate using this SSH key. So that's why you need to put that here and do it from the Falcon Pi Player. All right. So now that we've confirmed these two things, the next thing that you will need to do is to have the script that does the automatic committing. And so this is that script. Basically, it checks to make sure that you have provided a directory of what needs to, the directory that you want to commit. So you'll need to provide the full path to that, and we'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. And then once you do that, it will look for files to commit. It will add those files, and then it will push those files up, and that is it. Now, you can put this script in the media directory with the other script files that you have. So within the media directory, there is a scripts folder. You can put this in there and run it from there. I have the script, I have a different repository that I have all of my scripts in, because I have scripts for multiple Linux things. So I put all of those into one folder, and that's here in the home directory of the FPP user. So you can put it either place, doesn't matter, as long as you're able to call it. The next thing you'll need to do is to set up the cron job. And what the cron job will do is it will call that script and perform the said task in the script. So here I have that script that is running. And so I'm running it 4 minutes every the fourth minute of every 4 hours. So essentially it would be 4:04, 8:04, 12:04, and so forth. And this is running every day of the week, like I say, every 4 hours. And so what it's doing is it's calling bin bash, and then this here will need to be the path of the location of the script that you copied. So I have the script in my FPP home directory, Ubuntu automation, git scripts, autocommit-sh. And then this value here will be the directory that contains the files that you want to commit. So for the FPP version 4, that default directory is homes, well, /home/FPP/media. And then this last part is the file location of where the output of the script will go. And I have it going to the logs directory within the media directory. And at the end of this, we just have the output, the error output being combined into the same file. So you have one file with all the output from this script. And I'll put some, put the command in here so you can copy and paste it and use it in your cron tab. So once you do the cron tab and you exit, if you make a change, I can go back in here, and so it'll actually say that you've made a change. So let me modify one thing in here to save it. All right, and so if you do the cron tab correctly, it will say that the cron tab, install a new cron tab. If you make a mistake in doing this cron tab, and I'm gonna do this just for demonstration purposes. So I'm gonna take that out and run it. And it still installed the cron tab, which is kind of surprising, but when it goes to run, it will error out in the process. So, all right, so I've restored that file back. Now, what will happen is when this script goes to run, and if you're logging the output, you will see what happens when it does run. Let me see what this is. Auto commit. Okay. All right. And so for mine, since there hasn't been any files that have changed, the auto commit basically just shows the start and end times. But if there is something that has changed, if a file has changed, you will get a start time, and then you will get all the output from the git commands running as far as which files were added and committed and the changes that it detected, and then the status of that in this log file. And so just to show you what that will look like, whoops. All right, so I'm going to go into the front end here. And so what I'm gonna do is, I think I can, let's see if I can save this. So I'm gonna update the schedule. And if I do go up to the media folder and do git status, okay, nothing has changed. So what I need to do is to, I'm gonna change the name of one of my playlists and add a description. Lights on after the show. All right, and so we'll save that description. And so if I come back over here and do git status, all right, so what you see here is the file, one of the playlist files that corresponds to the one that I updated has been detected as being modified. And so if I run the script, and I can run this script outside of a cron job just to make sure that it is running as expected. So we'll do bin bash and home FPP Ubuntu. Nope. All right, so let me copy what the cron job is running because it seems like it's not predicting like I thought it would. So we'll copy this, and this is one other way to test that your cron job will actually run. You can type your cron job or type this command out, and then once you get it working the way it should, then go into copy and get it running from the command line, and then once you get it running from the command line, then copy and paste it into cron tab. All right, so I'm going to paste that and run it. And so this entire thing should run without you having to do anything. If it prompts you for a username or password, then you're probably using the HTTPS URL for Git and not the SSH URL, and you'll need to go back and change that. All right, so as you see, it committed the files. It is complaining about this because that configuration is not set up, so it uses the Falcon Player defaults. Well, it uses the current user, which is Falcon Player, for the defaults, and this is fine. It's not an issue. And as you see here, one file was detected as changed. There was one insertion and one deletion. Pretty much when you make an update to a file, it will add and replace that line because that's how Git tracks the file. So it added one line and replaced one and removed one line, but is essentially making that change for that same line. And I'll show you that here shortly. And then this part here is confirming, well, all the way down to this here is confirming that that file has been pushed and backed up to GitHub. So if we come back over to GitHub and look at the repository that you set up, so mine is Falcon Pi config, you'll see here that there was a file modified 1 minute ago, which is in the playlist directory. And then we also have the commits information up here. If you go into the playlist directory, you will see that nightlight.json was modified, and this is the current status of the file. And if you want to view the history of that file, you come up here and hit history, and you can view the commit information of what was changed. And so as you see here, the description was previously blank, and now it has a text there for the description. And so you can view the full file if you need to for this. So this is one way. Let's say you're committing a file from Xlights or something of that nature, and you make a mistake. And this is one way you can actually go back into your version control and pull the previous version of that file and restore the previous set of changes that you had working. This for me has been very beneficial, especially when it comes to setting up like the GPIO pins for my particular setup. I know some of you all use DMX and some of the other information on here. And so while FPP does have that backup utility built into it, you have to manually do that backup utility. With this particular setup, you don't have to do that backup utility. It will automatically back up per the schedule that you have defined. So kind of going back here, even this information here that you see on the channel outputs information, all of that will be contained into your files that are in that media directory. Let's see. Go back into the media directory, and I believe it's in config. Yeah, so for mine, I use GPIO pins because I have AC lights. Let's see if we can do a find. So what I'm gonna do is actually remove, so we'll change that one and hit save. All right, so channel output configuration is saved. Now if I do git status, so it actually modified two files. So it did codeother.json, and then settings is what it also modified. So if I do a view of settings, whoops. So I'll see that the current settings file has been modified. Okay, I'm not sure what it modified. Maybe it just, yeah, I'm not sure what it modified in that one. But then the, if we do a view of the code, a view of config code other.json, you'll see in here where I believe I modified tree 01. So if we jump down to tree 01, you'll see that here in the description. And so all of this information, especially the, you know, your network connectivity or your pixel strings or anything of the else nature, you'll definitely want to make sure that gets backed up in case you have a corruption issue with your Raspberry Pi or something happens to your Raspberry Pi. You can easily just pull that back in with little to no effort. So, and of course, restart here. Should restart. Okay, so that wraps things up for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below. I will be sure to answer your questions. I know this is not a typical setup for a lot of people with their Falcon Pi Player, but it has been a very beneficial setup for my particular Falcon Pi Player because of the fact I don't have to remember, hey, you need to back up your Falcon Pi Player in case something happens. It automatically does it. Now, one thing I will say is for this to be able to work, your Falcon Pi Player has to have access to the internet. I know a lot of people don't have their show network connected to the internet because of the fact they don't have a need for it, but for this to work, you do need to have this connected to the internet. That being said, I don't think you need to have your entire show network have access to the internet, but if you're running a multi-setup with Falcon Pi Player, so you have master and remote, I would suggest that the master be connected to the internet, and the master has like the copy of everything on there. And so when you make your changes, you make them to the master. Now, if you do have remotes, come and think of it, your remotes probably would need to have access to, because the configuration for a remote Falcon Pi Player is different than the configuration for the master Falcon Pi Player. And the reason being I say that is because if you're on the Falcon Pi Player status page, this mode is actually saved into one of those configuration files that I showed you earlier within that media directory. So yeah, you'll need to make sure that has access. If you don't want to have the remotes have access or the master to even have access to the internet, then you're not going to be able to use this solution. So there's no way around that, unfortunately. Well, I guess an alternative to having it do that is that you have a self-hosted version of GitLab on your network, or a self-hosted version of JIRA on your network, that these Falcon Pi devices can auto-commit to those locally hosted versions. That would probably be the only way to get around not having connectivity to the internet with this particular implementation. So keep that in mind, you know, as if you want to do that for your particular setup. Hopefully this has been insightful in giving you insight on how to set the automated backup solution on your Falcon Pi Player. Again, if you have any questions, drop those down below in the comments below. I will provide links to the items that I mentioned here in the video down in the description. So feel free to use these resources as you need. If you don't want to put your comment down in the comment section below, or question in the comment section below, feel free to message me on Instagram or Twitter at almostengr over there. Yeah. So you can send me a message directly there and I'll be sure to get back to you. So until next time, peace out.